Early 2000s, the airwaves are filled with smooth R&B hits, and everyone's vibing to the sounds that soothe the soul. Then, out of nowhere, Floetry bursts onto the scene. Two British queens, Marsha Ambrosius and Natalie Stewart, bring a fresh, poetic vibe that instantly takes over the music world. Their harmonies are unmatched, their sound is addictive, and their chemistry seems untouchable. On the outside, it's all gold records and Grammy nods. But behind the scenes, oh honey, the drama was brewing and it wasn't pretty. Let me tell you, this wasn't just your average creative disagreement. We're talking full-blown clashes of personalities, creative tug-of-wars, and tensions that could rival any reality TV drama. Natalie Stewart didn't hold back when spilling the tea. She admitted, "I was the manager, I was the booking agent, I was the PR, I was the photographer, all these different spaces." Imagine juggling all that while trying to build a music career. Natalie explained how the journey began. Friends of mine had moved to Atlanta and I got a show booked there, then another in Philly. That was in 2000. Once we got to Philadelphia, we started to work with a touch of jazz. And just like that, Floetry's path to stardom began. But trust me, it wasn't all smooth sailing. This story, it's got more twists than a soap opera, from hustlers to hit makers. By the time Floetry signed with DreamWorks and started working on their debut album, everything started to shift. Natalie, who had been wearing every hat imaginable, manager, booking agent, PR, photographer, decided to hand over management duties to Jay Irving. At first it seemed like the right move, but soon enough, things got messy. Natalie revealed he became the manager of Floetry. Now, some years later, when we started recording Flo'ology, Jay seemed to think he had created Floetry and wanted to get creatively involved. He started telling us to dumb it down, cross over, and make it mainstream. But if you're a poet, this is mainstream. Despite the drama, Floetry was thriving. Their unique sound captured the hearts of fans and critics alike. 7 Grammy nominations, sold-out tours, and a loyal fan base. They were riding high, but behind the accolades, cracks were starting to form. Natalie eventually fired Jay in 2006, but here's the kicker. Around the same time, Marsha Ambrosius signed a solo deal with Aftermath. Suddenly, their partnership was looking shaky, and when Jay was out, Marsha decided to follow his path instead. The question everyone was asking. Here's the million-dollar question. What went so wrong between Marsha and Natalie? How did two best friends and creative soulmates go from taking over the R&B world to barely being able to share a stage? Natalie summed it up simply. Whatever happened, there were a lot of things that just make Floetry never, ever, never happen again. And trust me, we're about to unpack it all. This is the story of the rise and fall of Floetry, the iconic duo that showed us even the strongest partnerships have breaking points. The beginnings of Floetry, where friendship and creativity collide. Let's take a trip back to the very beginning, before the glitz, the Grammys, and let's be real, the tension. Floetry wasn't some record label experiment or an industry-assembled act. No, this duo was the real deal. Marsha Ambrosius and Natalie Stewart weren't just collaborators, they were genuine friends. These two had been tight since their high school days in the UK, and their bond became the foundation for something truly magical. Natalie reflected on their journey, saying, "I came to America when I was 21 in 2000 with my best friend Marsha Ambrosius. We started a group called Floetry a year prior in London." That's right, two Brits with big dreams and even bigger talent bonded over a shared love of music and poetry. From the start, their creative chemistry was undeniable. Marsha brought the powerhouse vocals, delivering raw emotion with every note, while Natalie was the poetic force, weaving stories and introspective themes into their music. Together, they created a sound that was as innovative as it was unforgettable. Their beginnings were humble, yet full of promise. Performing in London's underground scene gave them the chance to refine their craft and experiment with their unique blend of R&B and spoken word. This wasn't just music, it was art, a genre-bending experience that stood out from anything else happening at the time. But as much as they loved the London scene, they quickly realized that if they wanted to make it big, really big, they had to take a leap of faith and head to the epicenter of R&B, the United States. The leap across the Atlantic. Taking a gamble on their dreams, Marsha and Natalie packed their bags and set their sights on America. And where did they land? Philadelphia, a city that was buzzing with neo-soul energy at the time. This was the early 2000s, and Philly was the place to be for artists who wanted to make waves in the R&B and soul scenes. It was home to legends in the making, like Jill Scott, Musique Soulchild, and Bilal. For Marsha and Natalie, it was the perfect environment to grow their artistry. Reflecting on those early days, days, Natalie said, "We landed in Philly when Jill Scott was recording her first album, and artists like Musique Soulchild, Bilal, Glenn Lewis, and Kindred were making waves. Walking into Larry Gold's studio was like stepping into your CD collection. Can you imagine? Walking into a studio surrounded by artists whose music you admired, whose work was already defining a generation. That kind of energy is contagious, and it wasn't long before Floetry began to carve out their own space in this vibrant scene. But make no mistake, their journey wasn't handed to them. It took grit, determination, and a relentless hustle to start turning heads. From open mics to big dreams. Their early days in Philly weren't glamorous, but they were full of passion. Marsha and Natalie were grinding, performing at open mics, connecting with other artists, and making their presence known in a competitive space. These weren't just performances, they were opportunities to prove themselves, to show the world what made them stand out. And stand out they did. Their unique combination of smooth, sultry vocals and thought-provoking spoken word was like nothing anyone had ever heard before. It wasn't just music, it was an experience. Their performances didn't just entertain, they captivated, leaving audiences in awe of their raw talent and undeniable chemistry. Soon enough, all that hard work paid off. They landed a record deal, and just like that, Floetry was officially born. But as we'll see, their journey was far from smooth sailing. This was just the beginning of a story that would take them to the heights of fame and the depths of conflict. The Floetic era, a cultural reset in R&B. Let's talk about 2002, a year when Floetry didn't just release an album, they dropped a cultural moment. Their debut project, Floetic, was nothing short of groundbreaking. It wasn't just music, it was a statement, a vibe, and a movement all rolled into one. This was the album that put the world on notice. Marsha, Ambrosius, and Natalie Stewart weren't here to play, they were here to change the game. Tracks like Say Yes and Floetic dominated the airwaves, becoming instant classics. Whether you were at a backyard cookout, cruising down the street, or vibing at home, you couldn't escape their sound. And honestly, who would want to? These tracks weren't just catchy, they were transformative. Say Yes was a sultry invitation, dripping with intimacy and emotion, while Floetic showcased their signature blend of spoken word and soulful melodies, proving they were unlike anyone else in the industry. The cracks begin to show, tensions beneath the surface. Behind the mesmerizing harmonies and those timeless grooves, Floetry wasn't as picture-perfect as their music suggested. While the duo captivated audiences with their seamless sound behind closed doors, it was a different story. Marsha Ambrosius and Natalie Stewart weren't just two artists collaborating, they were two fundamentally different individuals navigating success from opposite angles. A clash of visions. Marsha was laser-focused on the music. She thrived on technical precision, pouring her energy into the vocals, the production, and ensuring every note was flawless. She saw the craft as a science, an intricate puzzle she was determined to perfect. Natalie, however, approached their art from a different perspective entirely. For her, Floetry wasn't just about making music, it was a spiritual and poetic journey. Natalie explained it best. The thing about Floetry is that it's poetic with musical intent. It has a degree of ache, energy, blessing, light, and solution on it. Something you could play to meditate, sort your mind out, or heal yourself. That's what I do. It's art. It's healing. So I'm not going to jump on something to give a different meditation or insight into another energy. These differences weren't just artistic, they were philosophical. While Marsha sought to refine and push their sound into uncharted musical territory, Natalie was deeply protective of the integrity and message behind their work. For Natalie, Floetry wasn't just entertainment, it was a form of therapy, a beacon of healing for their listeners. The diverging paths. At first, their contrasting approaches seemed like a strength. Marsha's technical prowess and Natalie's poetic depth brought balance to the group, creating the unique magic that made Floetry so special. But as the spotlight grew brighter, those differences began to feel less like harmony and more like discord. Marsha's increasing focus on technical artistry and commercial appeal clashed with Natalie's commitment to the spiritual and emotional roots of their work. Natalie's refusal to compromise on the essence of their art sometimes stood at odds with the industry's demands for more streamlined, marketable content. These diverging visions of success became a slow-burning fuse that was ready to ignite. Tensions simmer beneath the surface. The pressure to maintain their rising fame only added fuel to the fire. Their schedules were grueling, with relentless tours, recording sessions, and public appearances. Success didn't just test their creativity, it tested their relationship. Small disagreements turned into larger conflicts, and moments of friction became harder to overlook. Their differences became evident not only in their creative process, but also in how they presented themselves to the world. Fans began to notice subtle cracks in their connection during performances. What once felt like a seamless partnership started to resemble two distinct individuals moving in different directions. The beginning of the unraveling. And if you think this is where the story ends, think again. The simmering tensions were just the start of what would become a dramatic unraveling. As their personal and creative differences grew harder to bridge, the cracks in their partnership deepened. What had once been a powerful collaboration built on mutual respect and shared ambition began to feel like a battle for control. Floetry's rise to fame had been meteoric, but maintaining that success came at a cost. And as we'll soon see, the weight of their differences was more than their partnership could bear. This was just the beginning of the storm that would shake Floetry to its core. The breaking point, when it all fell apart. The tension between Marsha Ambrosius and Natalie Stewart had been simmering for years, but during a particularly grueling tour, it finally reached a boiling point. While the exact details remain hazy, both women have kept the specifics close to their chests. The rumors that emerged painted a chaotic picture. Reports of explosive backstage arguments, canceled shows, and cutting insults swirled through the industry. Fans were left wondering what was happening to their beloved duo, a partnership in pieces. The tour was supposed to celebrate their success and strengthen their bond as performers, but instead, it became a battlefield. The creative and personal differences that had quietly grown over the years had now taken center stage, eroding the very foundation of their partnership. What had once been a friendship filled with mutual respect and admiration had turned into a cold, strained professional relationship. The magic that made Floetry such a force was no longer there, and both women knew it. For Marsha, the decision to leave wasn't easy, but it felt inevitable. She was ready to pursue her solo ambitions, a path she had been quietly preparing for. Natalie, on the other hand, was left to face the fallout, trying to salvage what was left of the Floetry legacy. A new Floetry, enter Amanda Seales. Determined to keep Floetry alive, Natalie made a bold move by bringing in Amanda Seales, a multi-talented artist known for her poetry and acting. Amanda brought her own flavor to the group, stepping into Marsha's role with confidence and energy. On paper, it seemed like the perfect solution. Amanda had the spoken word chops and a dynamic stage presence that could breathe new life into Floetry. But the fans, they weren't convinced. Floetry's magic had always been rooted in the deep connection between Marsha and Natalie, a bond that couldn't be replicated. Without Marsha's sultry vocals and undeniable chemistry with Natalie, the group felt like a shadow of its former self. Fans turn away. The reception to Amanda's addition was lukewarm at best. While some audiences appreciated her talent and respected Natalie's effort to carry on, many die-hard fans couldn't move past the absence of Marsha. For them, Floetry wasn't just a name or a brand. It was the unique synergy between two friends who had created something truly special. Without that synergy, the heart of Floetry was missing. The group's performances, while technically strong, lacked the soul and depth that had made them icons. Fans who once flocked to their shows now left feeling underwhelmed, longing for the original duo that had captured their hearts. Natalie's attempt to keep Floetry alive was valiant, but the reality was clear. Floetry without Marsha wasn't Floetry at all. The end of an era. With the fans turning away and the spark gone, Natalie eventually had to face the truth. The Floetry she had once dreamed of, the duo that had redefined R&B and spoken word, was no more. It wasn't just the end of a group, it was the end of an era. For fans, it was heartbreaking to see the duo who had given them so much fall apart. And for Marsha and Natalie, it was a stark reminder of how fragile even the strongest partnerships can be. This chapter of Floetry's story closed with a bittersweet lesson. Sometimes, no matter how much you fight to hold on, it's better to let go. But as we'll see, the individual paths Marsha and Natalie took after the breakup would prove that their talent and impact were far from over. The story of Floetry was ending, but for Marsha and Natalie, new beginnings were just around the corner. The aftermath, separate roads, shared impact. The breakup of Floetry was devastating for fans, but it marked the start of two distinct journeys for Marsha Ambrosius and Natalie Stewart. Marsha wasted no time proving her prowess as a solo artist. She released Late Nights and Early Mornings, a stunning debut that showcased her ability to craft deeply personal and universally relatable music. Critics raved, fans embraced her solo vibe, and Marsha cemented her place as a powerhouse in the industry. Tracks like Far Away and Hope She Cheats on You revealed a more introspective, raw side of her artistry, one that resonated with listeners and brought her a new level of acclaim. Natalie, on the other hand, took a quieter but equally meaningful path. Staying true to her poetic roots, she focused on independent projects that aligned with her original artistic vision. For Natalie, it was never about commercial success. It was about authenticity and staying connected to the spirit of her craft. Through spoken word performances, poetry collections, and intimate shows, she found a dedicated audience who appreciated her depth and message. Though their paths were different, the shadow of Floetry lingered. Fans couldn't help but compare their solo efforts to the magic they had created together. And while both women achieved success in their own right, the longing for a reunion never fully went away. The legacy of Floetry, a sound that stands the test of time. Floetry's impact went far beyond their chart-topping hits. They redefined what R&B could be, blending sultry melodies with spoken word in a way that hadn't been done before. Their unique sound became a bridge between poetry and music, inspiring countless artists and creating a blueprint for innovation in the genre. Their breakup wasn't just a loss for their fans, it was a loss for music. But as painful as it was to see them part ways, their legacy continues to thrive. Tracks like Say Yes and Poetic remain timeless classics, celebrated by old and new audiences alike. Even now, their influence is felt in the work of emerging artists who draw from Floetry's fearless approach to blending art forms. Is the magic gone for good? The question on everyone's mind is, will they ever find their way back to each other? While the 2015 reunion tour sparked hope, the frostiness between Marsha and Natalie was hard to ignore. For now, both seem content walking their separate paths, but fans continue to hold on to the dream of a full-circle comeback. Whether or not a reunion ever happens, one thing is certain: Floetry's story is a testament to the beauty and complexity of collaboration. They reminded us that magic can happen when two creative forces come together, even if that magic is fleeting. So as we revisit their hits and reflect on their journey, we're left with a mix of nostalgia and gratitude. Floetry gave us something rare, music that wasn't just heard but felt. And while their time as a duo may have been short-lived, the impact they made will last forever. Who knows, maybe one day the stars will align and Marsha and Natalie will grace the stage together again. Until that day comes, we'll always have their timeless catalog to remind us of just how brilliant they were.